The first of those, the reduction in the use of national vetoes. The second, the business of reweighting the votes between member states when they do vote on issues. The third of them, limiting the size of the European Commission team. And the fourth, allowing some member states, if they see fit, to go alone with further integration. First, though, the almost ritual attacks from anti-capitalists that seem to dog every gathering of world leaders these days. The numbers were small, but the violence for a short time this morning was intense. Around 20 policemen were hurt as the attackers threw rocks and the police replied with tear gas. It was an inauspicious start to a summit that's meant to be about building harmony around Europe, securing the advantages of capitalism throughout the continent. For Tony Blair, arriving here this morning, the key to this meeting is the end result, the green light for enlargement. The Prime Minister has made it clear he wants a deal and is willing to compromise to get it. They're not on key issues where Britain insists on keeping its veto. For the summit chairman, the French President Jacques Chirac, this is potentially the greatest triumph or disaster of his long political career. He must cajole, threaten, charm, until all sides are satisfied. And the insider's view is that all sides, including Britain, will eventually feel able to sign.
Every country here has interests which it wants to protect and defend. And Mr. Blair has made it clear that for him, tax and social security, I suspect because of domestic political pressures, are no-go areas. Other people have no-go areas. And at the end of the day, they'll reach an accommodation which they believe is in their national interest and in Europe's interest, will help to make things work better.
A short time ago, an image of enlargement. An all-family photo included the heads of all the applicant countries as well. It'll be a big club. This summit is designed to ensure it doesn't fall apart. So there we are, they get down to business this afternoon. They are likely to be here most of the weekend, Anna.
Justin, we keep hearing how tricky these negotiations are going to be. How true would it be to say that Britain's going to end up in a team of one lined up against the rest of Europe?
That would simply not be true this time round. In fact, the biggest argument here doesn't really involve Britain at all. It's between France and Germany, and it's a potentially very crucial one. The Germans want more votes. They want to be the top dogs, if you like, in Europe to reflect their huge population, their 80 million population of a unified Germany. The French are desperately worried about that. They want parity with Germany. They'd be very worried about losing it. The biggest argument then is between those two countries on that issue. And frankly, Britain on that issue doesn't desperately want Germany to go away and have more power, but at the end of the day, it would be willing to give way if necessary. It's not a crucial issue here for Tony Blair. So no, this is not a summit about Britain versus the rest. Though, of course, Britain does have things it wants to hold on to very dearly here, and there'll certainly be some tough arguing that involves Tony Blair.
Justin, thank you very much. Hundreds of people have assembled in Peckham in South London this lunchtime for a memorial service for the murdered schoolboy Damilola Taylor. His family have been joined in church by children from his Sunday school class, members of the local community, politicians and police. Damilola died 10 days ago after being stabbed as he walked home. The service is about to start and our correspondent Stephen Cape is there. Stephen.
It was Damilola's birthday today. He would have been 11. A memorial service is the only way the family know how to mark this occasion. From all over South London, people came to remember Damilola's short life and the tragic way he died. The local MP, Harriet Harman, was also there. Early on, preparations were underway. The service was due to last an hour, with Damilola's brother Tunde making a special tribute.
This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice.
Choir practice before the service. Damilola's family went to this evangelical Pentecostal church of the Mountain of Fire and Miracles Ministries. Its pastor said that he'd received a fax on behalf of Prince Charles, apologising for not being able to attend, but saying his heart went out to Damilola's family, who decided the service had to be held today.
Damilola actually asked his mom. They want to celebrate the birthday, his 11th birthday, but unfortunately he wasn't here to do so. So they just want to continue in his memory, and that's why they picked today for that very purpose.
The service is also yet another appeal to the killer or killers to come forward as the police continue their inquiries. What I can tell you is that the service has now started. It'll last about an hour in total, and there'll be readings from Damilola's brother, also from the minister Paul Boateng. But let's now go to the service. As you can see, there's been an address, in fact, by the moderator. They're now sitting down. And then there'll be an opening prayer from, in fact, the pastor, the person you heard earlier on. And there, of course, he is.
Welcome to this memorial service for Damilola Taylor, who will have celebrated his 11th birthday today, but for the senseless killing of that young boy and of the dream. The family would like to welcome you, and the church also would like to welcome you. And we pray that in Jesus' name, when next we meet all together, we're meeting for a great and mighty thing also in Jesus' name. You are welcome.
We'll now turn to our programs.
Well, what I can tell you is that you're now going to have a welcome, followed by the hymn Rock of Ages. And one of the most interesting aspects of this is that there's going to be a reading taken from Genesis, which is about the very subject of bullying. You may have heard yesterday Richard Taylor, the father, saying that a couple of days before the young boy died, he was crying on the telephone, saying that he was being bullied by people. He was being beaten. He was being called gay because of his color of his skin, which was slightly whiter.
Stephen, thank you. And you can see live coverage of the Damilola Taylor Memorial Service over on BBC News 24. More heavy rain and winds gusting up to 80 miles an hour. That's the forecast for much of the United Kingdom for the next 48 hours. The severe weather warning comes as new maps are published showing that nearly 3 million people live in areas at risk of flooding. Our correspondent Richard Bilton is here with more awful details. Richard.
Well, Anna, the bad weather is going to hit a country still suffering from the last floods. There are 41 flood warnings still in place. That includes a severe warning on the River Wye near Hereford. And the weather front arriving today is likely to be extreme. Gale-force winds up to 80 miles an hour and torrential rain across a wide area. Now, there have been suggestions that this could be the start of a long period of bad weather. One research group has studied patterns of weather in the Atlantic and says it's not looking good.
Well, we're looking, I'm afraid, at a warmer, which is good news. I'm afraid also a wetter and more stormy winter. So I'm afraid the current poor weather we've been experiencing is likely to carry on for a bit longer, certainly the next month and possibly through the end of February.
Now, the Environment Agency says we all need to be more aware of the dangers of flooding. They've published maps that show which areas across the country are under threat. Here in Bewdley, for example, they demonstrate that when the waters rise, dozens of properties are hit. They say across the country, people need to know the risk.
It's very important. People don't realise that if they live in a flood risk area, they're much more likely to be flooded than they are experience a house fire. They're quite happily put in fire detectors or smoke detectors, but they don't do sensible things like keeping all their valuables upstairs, keeping insurance policies somewhere safe so they don't get wet when the flood does come.
So what's it like on the ground? Umberley in North Devon was hit in the last floods and they're preparing for the worst. Philip Lote is there.
Yes, Richard, when the River Tor broke its banks just over 5 weeks ago, the village of Umberley here in North Devon bore the full brunt of the floodwater raging down the valley. In fact, this bridge here was under water and the floodwater came across the road to put these houses under about 5 feet of water. In fact, building work is still going on to repair the damage from that flood. I'm joined by Tony Pring, who owns one of the houses. Now, you've been told by your insurer that they're not going to cover you anymore from this weekend. You must be a very worried man.
Extremely worried, because obviously we've tried to get cover elsewhere and nobody wants to know. We've been flooded 3 times and that's a black mark and nobody wants to know anymore. So yes, I'm extremely worried and we don't quite know what to do yet. And it's a question of trial and error, keep trying, but at the moment nobody wants to know.
The villagers here too must be concerned about what may happen tonight and what may happen to the village once again.
Yes, it's not a very good forecast for the night. It's they're threatening quite a few millimetres of rain, and you know, it's a question that the river does rise so quickly now with the being at about 20-mile valley, and of course we should be keeping an eye on it tonight. Extremely.
Tony Pring, thanks very much indeed. And as you can see, it's started to rain already here in Devon, so the omens for this afternoon and this evening aren't good. Richard.
Thanks, Phil. Well, the Environment Agency says if you live in an affected area, you should make some preparations so you're not caught out by flooding, and to listen out for any warnings from the emergency services.
Thanks, Richard. But the latest tests for 11-year-olds in England show an improvement in English, maths and science, and standards in some of the most deprived areas are rising faster than in many affluent suburbs. But the head of England's best-performing primary school says schools are being deluged with too many demands. Our correspondent James Westhead has visited the school at the bottom of the league table.
Go and run around.
Head teacher Paul Larkey's just started one of the toughest jobs in education, turning around the school with the worst results in England. Here at Wandle Primary School in Wandsworth, 6 out of 7 pupils fail to reach basic standards in English, maths and science. It serves one of London's most deprived inner-city areas, with a high turnover of pupils, many who don't speak good English. But news the school's hit the bottom of the league tables left parents deeply worried.
I've actually, thought of taking my child out of the school anyway, because I've heard things from other parents about the school.
By the time she gets to year 6, I guarantee she'll do well. I know.
Winning back parents' confidence is one thing, but before he can improve standards, he's had to sort out discipline, stamping out bad behaviour once rife.
Noise levels were high. There was movement around the school which I think was inappropriate, but I think we've managed to do something about that quite quickly.
In every classroom, new teachers with a new focus on achievement. Extra money has brought extra staff, but the key will be to convince children from often difficult backgrounds they can be the best.
I work harder, and I think everybody does in the school.
He's pushing us to do it. Not pushing in a horrible way, but in a good way.
Rebuilding the fragile confidence of these children will be a delicate but crucial process. The hope is when this class take their tests in a year and a half's time, their results and their futures will have been transformed. This head teacher's inspirational approach won't work everywhere, but in inner city schools where poverty has long been an excuse for failure, it could be the answer.
It won't happen unless I believe it can happen. It's about expectations. If I didn't sincerely believe that attainment in the school would be considerably better in a year's time, I'd be the wrong person for the job.
At least these children now know someone has confidence in them, and that may just make all the difference. James Westhead, BBC News at Wandle Primary School.
And you can find all those tables with a page for every primary school in England at BBC News Online. The Bank of England is leaving interest rates unchanged at 6%. They've now been at the same level for 10 months. Business leaders say there's growing evidence that rates have now peaked and they're hoping for cuts in the new year. The singing star Madonna and her partner, the English film director Guy Ritchie, are to marry in the Scottish Highlands just before Christmas. Bands proclaiming the forthcoming wedding were displayed this morning at Dornoch in Sutherland. It's thought that the ceremony may take place at Dornoch Cathedral, with a lavish reception in Skibo Castle.
The sleepy little town of Dornoch woke up to the news that it's been expecting for days. At the local registry office, the confirmation was there in black and white for all to see. Madonna Louise Ciccone will marry Guy Stuart Ritchie here in 15 days' time. The couple are said to have been enchanted by the place, so much so that they're expected to have their son Rocco christened at Dornoch Cathedral the day before the wedding. Although the woman who will marry them, the Reverend Susan Brown, was giving nothing away. The fact that such a huge star and her film director fiancé have chosen to tie the knot here has not fazed local people. These women are already planning Madonna's hen night.
Well, we put a veil on her, L plates. She may not need the L plates, but the Like a Virgin song could be sung at some point and we would be the backup.
Oh, she doesn't have to pay for it. We put the money in. The bride never puts into the kitty, so she'd enjoy it. She'd have a good laugh.
What's the point of her coming if she doesn't do the whole thing? It's a Highland tradition. She's got to do it.
Just outside Dornoch lies Skibo Castle, a Highland retreat for the rich and famous. It's reported up to 200 friends and family will gather here for a matrimonial feast. It's in this magnificent setting that Madonna and Guy Ritchie are expected to celebrate their wedding on December the 22nd. Staff here today were remaining tight-lipped, but it's likely nothing less than a Scottish castle will do for the Queen of Pop. Carol Jones, BBC News at Skibo Castle.
At the time, 17 minutes past 1, and later in the programme. Parent power, now dads could get 2 weeks paternity leave. And the first British city where the ethnic minority will soon be in the majority. New fathers may be given 2 weeks paid paternity leave. That's what the government's proposing in a new green paper on family and work. Parenting groups have welcomed the news, but industry leaders are warning that it could damage business. More details from our social affairs correspondent, Alison Holt.
Dylan is just 2 weeks old.
How do you get on with doctors today?
Oh, it's all right. And for the first week of his life, his dad was with him as much as his mum. As a teacher, David Anderson already gets a week's leave, but the government plans would give all men the right to 2 weeks paid paternity leave.
I think it's absolutely essential to make that immediate bond as a family so that you can learn together as a family what to do. In this case, it's our first child, so there was a lot of learning for us to do.
As well as improving a father's rights, a mother would have maternity leave extended to 6 months. And controversially, there's a proposal to allow both parents to reduce the hours they work, providing it doesn't harm their employer's business. Sarah Anderson, a mother herself, runs an employment agency with 40 staff. She warns small companies can't afford such plans.
I have a real fear that if we home in on parental leave and reviews to maternity pay, then there could be a backlash against women or people of childbearing age.
And the Trade and Industry Secretary, who was meeting working parents today, knows overcoming such concerns will be vital.
Britain already lags behind many European countries in the way in which it balances work and home life. But in the end, these are options, and they'll cause fierce argument, which means there won't be any change this side of an election. Alison Holt, BBC News, East London.
So is paid paternity leave a good thing? Jack O'Sullivan from the parents group Fathers Direct and Ruth Lees from the Institute of Directors. Jack O'Sullivan, first, we still lag behind other countries. Do you think this green paper goes far enough?
We don't think it goes far enough, but it's a really important moment for fathers and for families. We know that fathers really need to be there in the home after the birth, just not least for the health of the child and the mother. You know, we've got high rates of caesareans, we've got, if the father is around, postnatal depression rates fall. We know breastfeeding is more successful if fathers are there and being supportive. We know all the education goes on in the first couple of weeks when health visitors are there in the home. And if fathers aren't there, if they're out at work, they miss out, they lose confidence, and they don't feel capable.
Well, let me put that to Ruth Lee. Isn't it about time that businesses recognise that if they're going to employ people who are parents, they can't ignore that fact?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, why can't they take annual leave apart from anything else? But I think we're all in favour of family-friendly policies, and we encourage businesses actually to bring them in. But the key thing is that some businesses find it very much more difficult to cope with these particular regulations, as they no doubt will be, than others. Don't forget that 95% of businesses in this country have actually got less than 10 employees. 99% of them have got less than 50 employees. They don't have dedicated human resources personnel at all. And what ends up, of course, the poor old boss, as he's always said, he'll be the one who has to deal with all the extra paperwork, and they're fed up with paperwork, and he'll be the one who has to arrange extra cover. Indeed, a lot of the time, he'll be providing that cover himself, and he'll be dealing with annual leave, parental leave, maternity leave,
Let me
sick
interrupt
leave,
you and
and
just say we hear all these very good arguments, but other countries manage to do it and give parents far more leave than we have in this country.
Possibly some European countries, but please note, I noticed that, again, I'm not accusing you of being pro-Euro in this particular instance, but if your programmes never talk about what it's like in the rest of the world. It's always about Europe. And the problem is, too, if you actually look at the labour markets in Europe, they're not working as well as they are in this country or in the US, where it's a less regulated market, because obviously they have much higher unemployment rates and they have lower activity rates as well.
Have you got sympathy for small businesses?
We've got sympathy for them, but, you know, it's not a very long time. British fathers work the longest hours in Europe.
Europe?
Yeah, in Europe.
What about the States?
let's look at Europe. Think about Australia. The biggest insurer in Australia, AMP, gives its fathers 6 weeks paid parental leave. They studied the impact of that, and they realised they were making money by looking after their dads, because they were getting fathers who the staff turnover fell dramatically. They actually did the calculation. They made a 400% return on their investment. It makes sense for business to look after dads. They're not shirkers.
We've run out of time.
I know it's a debate they can cope with it, but a lot of small firms, believe me, cannot.
This debate will go on, I know, and it's a very important debate. Thank you both very much for joining us. Leicester is likely to become the first British city where the majority of the population is not white. The council there says that by the time of the census in 2011, fewer than 50% of the residents will be white. Our correspondent Navdeep Dhariwal has been to Leicester to find out more about the growth of a genuinely multicultural city.
The future faces of Leicester City. The Rushmede School is made up of 95% Asian and black students. Of 1,300 here, only 57 of the pupils are white.
Those students get a good deal. They enjoy being here. They set high standards alongside other colleagues. So I feel that that's fine. It's that rich ingredient, that rich kaleidoscope that actually adds something rather than takes away.
Leicester and Birmingham are set to be the first British cities with majority non-white populations by 2011. Leicester City's been transformed by the cultures and achievements of its black and Asian communities, which have consistently contributed to the city's success.
It would be boring if it was just a full white community, but with a mixed race in here, it's not. It's just fine.
I've lived here all my life, and when I was younger, I used to get picked on by white people, but now it don't bother me. Everyone's changing now, and they're not so bothered about different countries, people from different countries living together.
The local council believes the key for cities like this is to see diversity as being positive. The predicted population changes in places like Leicester and Birmingham reflects the changing face of British society and ultimately what it means to be British. Navdeep Dhariwal, BBC News, Leicester.
Police are stepping up their search for the missing Leeds teenager Leanne Tiernan. Leanne failed to return to her home in the Bramley area of the city after a Christmas shopping trip 11 days ago. There have been reported sightings of her, but none have been confirmed.
And she's walking now along the bottom of the gill on this open land there.
Renewing their appeals for help from the public, West Yorkshire Police are now widening their search for Leanne Tiernan. So far, detectives have found no clue as to the 16-year-old's whereabouts. Their best lead is one reported sighting of the teenager.
A witness has come forward who saw a teenage girl walking through the gill around 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. Now, it's possible that the witness saw Leanne, but we've got to make sure that there were no other girls walking through the gill at that time.
The Tiernan family say Leanne's disappearance is totally out of character. Divers have now joined the police search team as rivers and canals are examined. 150 officers are now working on the investigation. But it's now a week and a half since Leanne was last seen, and the police admit they're becoming more concerned with every day that passes. Daniela Ralph, BBC News.
The court case that could finally decide the result of the American election is due to start shortly. Al Gore's team have already said they'll accept the ruling of the Florida Supreme Court on hand recounts, even if it goes against them. Over to our Washington correspondent, Philippa Thomas. Philippa, can you tell us about the court action that's going on this morning?
Well, the Florida Supreme Court case will start in 2 hours' time, Anna, and it should be over fairly quickly. Both sides are being given half an hour to make their case. And of course, the Gore lawyers are saying that 14,000 disputed ballots should be recounted by hand. There are also 2 other cases going on, though maybe not as crucial, both this morning, and they're in 2 counties where Democrats are arguing for ballots to be thrown out because they say they're ballots that went for the Republican candidate George W. Bush, but the applications were tampered with by Republican officials beforehand. So 3 chances for Al Gore finally to come back, and the Supreme Court, I think, is the most important one.
And we understand that the Florida legislature is threatening to jump in and make their own decision on who represents Florida. Is that right?
Just just when you thought it couldn't get any more complicated, it could. Yes, they are threatening to call a special session beginning tomorrow, and the reason is that there is a legal deadline for Florida to decide who it's voting for. That deadline is next Tuesday. If it looks like the court cases are going to run on, if perhaps there will be a recount, then the legislature may say it just can't be over by Tuesday. We will step in, we will name Florida's electors. Now, the problem for Al Gore is that legislature is dominated by Republicans and would be very likely to nominate George W. Bush. So the constitutional warfare, if you like, could go on for some time yet.
By then, we might know. Philippa, thank you very much. With only one day gone in the final test in Karachi, it seems the best England can hope for against Pakistan is a draw. England's bowlers put them in a strong position early on by taking 3 quick wickets, but then Pakistan took control with both Inzamam ul Haq and Yusuf Yohana scoring centuries. They finished on a total of 292 with no further loss. More now on the memorial service for Damilola Taylor, the schoolboy murdered in South London last week. Damilola's family were joined by hundreds of people from Peckham and the surrounding area to remember him on what would have been his 11th birthday. Among the congregation were some of the police team, which is still searching for his killers. The mourners prayed for God's help.
Father, let your peace that passeth all understanding descend upon our lives, and especially, Father, the family of Damilola. So that, Lord, because you alone, Father, giveth that peace that the world cannot give.
The memorial service being held now for Damilola Taylor in South London. In a moment, the latest from the BBC News teams across the United Kingdom. But that's all this Thursday lunchtime from the 1 o'clock news. Good afternoon.